The in-season tournament was announced. It's going to work, people. It's going to work. Plus, more frolicking fun with Tony Jones on the off-season interview series. It's all coming up on today's edition of Locked on Jazz.
You are Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
How are you? I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. This is Locked on Jazz. The NBA announced its play-in tournament. Jazz will play 4 games in the in-season, not to play in the in-season tournament. And the more I look at it, I think it's going to work. I'll explain to you why. Plus, good news on Taylor Hendricks and Keontae George, and an interesting regrade from Nate Duncan before Tony Jones joins us on the program. We dig into part 2 of our conversations. As I mentioned, I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider, and this is Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. Thank you so much for making Locked on Jazz your first listen. Everydayers, you're the best. We are free. We are available on all podcasting apps. We're also up on YouTube. Please subscribe. Give us a 5-star review. Shout outs to anybody who's given us a 5-star review. I need to give those shout outs. Those people still on Apple giving the 5-star review. Spotify chat available for you. Thank you all very much for doing that. Greatly appreciate it. Does matter, does help. And if nothing else, just makes us all feel good. All right, let's get to it. The play-in was announced. And it's new, it's different. And so a lot of people are like, well, okay, it's not going to work. I actually am going to go the exact opposite on this. I think it's going to work. And here's why. Let's just walk through it for a second. So we have the Jazz games. They play Memphis on November 10th and Portland on November 14th and Phoenix on November 17th and the Lakers on the 21st. So let's just isolate Utah for a quick second. We go and play. We're in Memphis on the 10th of November. They don't have Ja Morant back by then, and the Jazz go into Memphis and they win. All right, so we win. No big deal. It's just a play-in. Nobody. Okay, well, then Portland comes to town. Let's say they've moved Dame. They're not that good. We win again. All right, well, you said you weren't that into it, but now the Jazz are 2-0, and all of a sudden Phoenix comes to town 3 days later, so there's a little momentum to it. It's a national TV game on ESPN. And if the Jazz were to beat the Suns in that game at home, all of a sudden they're 3-0 with a guaranteed maybe to have a tie, or let's say the Jazz lose that game. And they go suddenly, but they go to play the Lakers then on the 21st. Well, we'll back up to where this all starts in a minute, but the Lakers play Phoenix as one of the early games of this thing. So let's say that the Lakers have won that game and Phoenix lost it. So now Phoenix has got 1 loss and the Jazz have 1 loss and the Lakers say maybe have 0 losses. And so if the Jazz were to go beat the Lakers on that last night of the year, even if they're just 2-1 and you don't think there's a great chance they can go to LA, and you at least got a game, national television game, in which you're considering, hey, wait a sec, if the Jazz win and get this, if they win by a certain amount of points, because now you're playing the tiebreaker is going to be points on some of these things. You could very easily have Phoenix at 3-1, the Jazz at Phoenix 1, and the Lakers at 3-1. We're in. So, just walk through it for a second. The first game in our bracket, which is, if you understand it, we've potted together Memphis, Portland, Utah, Phoenix, and LA. Those 5 teams. There's 6 of these. The winners of that pod go on, and 2 at-large teams go. So, Memphis plays Portland in the first game. Okay, so, again, nobody's that into it. Memphis wins. Utah plays Memphis. Memphis comes in. They're 1-0, and in-season tournament, Jazz play them. Let's say Memphis wins that game. Well, all of a sudden, Memphis is 2-0. Now, you don't think Memphis is going to be fully in, at least their fan base, on the Laker game on the 14th of November? And frankly, the Lakers and Phoenix debut on November 10th against each other on an ESPN game, which will be the first time LeBron and Durant have played each other in forever, if it happens. But also, like, that's a huge game in our pool because the winner of the Lakers-Phoenix game really is expected to now be the team that advances. So let's say the Lakers go into Phoenix and they win that game, and the Lakers are suddenly, 3-0, or they go through, or even the Lakers, and the Jazz go for the final game of their playing on the 21st to LA, you might have a chance to knock the Lakers out. So even if it doesn't go well for the Jazz, let's say the Jazz lose to Memphis, they beat Portland, they lose to Phoenix, we're 1-2, we're going to LA, but we have a chance to knock the Lakers out. Our fan base is into that. This is going to work. You've put a little competition out there. Do the players buy in? I think there's going to be a pretty heavy thing by the league to not rest guys in this kind of game. So I think it's going to, do the players totally buy into? There's something to it, right? Phoenix, LA, a little extra to it. ESPN, I'm guessing guys go on November 10th pretty hard on that game. Does Utah go into Memphis with an extra zest? Yeah, maybe, right? Our chances of making the playoffs can be a hard task for us to make the playoffs this year. There's a chance, but it's going to be hard. Do we suddenly have more juice than we would in it? Maybe. But what the real story is the minute you win one or two games into this in-season tournament, your fan base is going to be completely engaged. So it's going to work. And a fan base might be able to actually dictate a player's engagement a little bit. Like the players in the organization might find it to be something that, well, if the fans are into it, we probably should buy in a little bit. But I really do. Just take it. We play Memphis on the 10th. It's going to be weird. How do we do this as a broadcasters? We're going to be talking about it. Memphis will have already played Portland. Maybe they will have won. Maybe they won't have. Who knows? But let's say they have. And so if the Jazz suddenly beat Memphis on November 10th, and they're 1-0 in pool play, and the Lakers have suddenly beat Phoenix, and then the Jazz play Portland, we're suddenly 2-0. Well, now we're in. We're all in now. And the Jazz then would host Phoenix 3 days later at 2-0, and maybe Phoenix has lost their one game already. Phoenix plays their games a little late. This would just be their second game in the pool play. They've lost to the Lakers. Maybe they check out. Maybe that's what happens. Maybe that's where we see it, as they lose their first one. The Lakers are like, we don't care that much. So they check out, and suddenly the Jazz are 3-0. It's going to work. To what level? I don't know. But fans are going to buy in. We've put a little standard on it. It's going to buy in. People are going to be there. It's going to be a lot of fun. Tony Jones is coming up in just a second from The Athletic for part 2 of our interview. If you missed it yesterday, go back and grab it. It's available for you on YouTube as well as on the podcast feed. And then Friday, after the schedule is released on Thursday, we'll do a Friday, kind of look at the schedule, and then Tony will wrap with us. I thought it was interesting. Nate Duncan of Dunked on Prime and Danny LaRue are doing a review of the 2022 offseason, right? So the year we traded Donovan, Quinn left, we trade Rudy, that offseason. So Dunked On is doing this kind of review, look back at all of that. And it was interesting. They're regrading, and I mean, it was fascinating to listen back to some of them, because oh my gosh, did Dallas ever have just the single worst offseason you could possibly imagine? I didn't quite realize how bad that offseason was. So you look back at a bunch of these things, and they're regrading them, and it's interesting. It's definitely geeky and things like that. And to me, it's the most important offseason ever in the history of the Utah Jazz. So it's an interesting thing to hear what they have to say, and they both still are over the moon on what the Jazz did. And I don't think there's a lot of doubt on that, but it is interesting. Cleveland looks like they had a great offseason, and Minnesota looks like they might be had Anthony Edwards is going to be good. Those draft picks that we got, it's not clear entirely yet of what they're all going to be, right? We've got Ochai Agbaji out of it. We didn't get a massive pick this year from Minnesota. We'll see. Maybe, Keontae George could turn out to be really, really good. And then so Nate changed his grade from an A to an A+. And Danny LaRue, these are the two hosts of that show, kept his grade from an A to an A. So, still big bonus for the Jazz. What's interesting, it was I was wondering if Minnesota looks worse on Minnesota. Walker Kessler's good. Rudy didn't have a great year, and that did happen. Nate went from a D to an F-, and Danny went from a D to an F-. So that was all in Dunked on Prime. Give him credit for it, but just an interesting portrayal of that offseason and looking at it. The team that jumped the most, by the way, was Denver. They had kind of graded the offseason as bad. Now they regraded it as good. Few injury notes Boston Celtic injury note, Kristaps Porzingis is out of the World Cup. Won't play for the FIBA World Cup, plantar fasciitis. Jazz injury notes, cleared to play, baby. Keontae George, 4 weeks after his injury, is cleared for on-court activities, and Taylor Hendricks has been cleared for on-court activities. Bryce Sensabaugh has not yet from his knee surgery in March. That's getting lengthy, right? If he had knee surgery in March, we're 5 months out on that. So interesting to see, and that's the second surgery, I believe, on that knee. So it will be interesting to see when Sensabaugh is, or if this is one of those things where you're really waiting to see how long it takes before that holds. There are some meniscus surgeries that are not great right now, that aren't having huge success rates. And so maybe that's what he had, and you're really trying to, it's like Colin Sexton this year, was kind of the Jazz were open, hey, we got to get him through the season, and they did. And that makes his chances of the surgery holding at a much better rate. All right, Tony Jones comes up here next on Locked on Jazz. Got to love TJ. He's had great fun with him. Sarah Todd next week. I'm excited for that. That'll be a great conversation as well. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Murdoch Chevy, located in Woods Cross, also in Logan. Murdoch Chevy. You got the Murdochs. You've got 85 plus years of contributions to Utah and connection. And you got Chevy, which is Americana, and the deals are just fantastic right now with Chevy. You've got the SUV lineup that is fabulous with the Blazer and the Trailblazer. And of course, it's got the Utah County assault vehicles, the Suburban and the Tahoe. The truck lineup, there's nothing better. $7,000 off the Silverado right now with the Silverado and the Colorado. So make sure you head over to Murdoch Chevy, located in Woods Cross, also up in Logan. Feel free to email me first at dlock09@gmail.com, and we'll make sure we get you the VIP meeting. By the way, the first ever all-electric Silverado is going to be available in the fall of 2023. That's right around the corner. So make sure you get your eyes out for that. That'll be pretty awesome. That's the first ever electric Silverado truck by Chevy. Today's show is also brought to you by the great people over at Intercap Lending. This is the kind of year when Intercap starts doing great stuff for all the back-to-school stuff. Intercap, just Brock Worthen and all of those guys over there with their backpack campaigns in the years past, such wonderful members of our community. Incredible customer service. Steve Carter is the best, and that's what makes me give you such great kind of security when I tell you that it's time that Steve Carter is here for you. Seriously, nobody is more consistent and better with their customer service than Steve Carter. We've sent multiple people there. Dave Thurman said, all I can say is Steve Carter is by far the best loan officer I've ever worked with. That's saying something because I've done my fair share of loans in my lifetime. He's responsive, just down-to-earth person to work with, which is rare. You go to Brad Hickman. Intercap has been the best experience I've ever had refinancing a home loan. Steve Carter gave detailed options, custom for my own situation. The loan process was made easy by the experienced, knowledgeable, timeless, and personable nature of Steve and other members of Intercap Lending. It's all at Intercap Lending. Intercap Lending, NMLS number 190465. You can call Steve directly at 385-800-8528. That's 385-800-8528. But make sure you mention Locked On to get the corporate discount, or email me at dlock09@gmail.com, and we'll get you set up directly with Steve Carter and have that experience. All at Intercap Lending. Day 2 with Muscle Watch Tony Jones of The Athletic, who never fully answered all of the rotation questions. I want to point that out. I'm just gonna try.
I tried.
You did. It's hard. It's super hard when you like put the little like that's how.
But you got to put it in blocks, right?
Right, and you have to have little rules. Like one of my rules is the only thing I would think is, so I have Jordan or Colin on the floor for all 48 minutes. Like one or the two. Like one or the other is what I'm saying. Like if Jordan's out, Colin's in. If Colin's out, Jordan's in. We got to have one of the two on the floor at all times.
I think here's the thing. So up front, you have Lauri, Walker, and John Collins.
Yeah.
Kelly's your first big off the bench. Taylor Hendricks is your fifth big. All right. You have, let's just say Colin Sexton starts. Let's say he wins starting role. You have Sexton and Clarkson in the backcourt. And if you start Sexton, that allows the Jazz. That's another reason why Sexton could start, because it actually allows the Jazz to naturally put Keontae George in the rotation.
He plays in the second unit, and then I do think Abaji slides in a little bit. Though is Hendricks? Like, we'll get to that in a second. All right.
Well, Abaji's the first guard off the bench.
Okay.
And he also doubles as Lauri's primary backup. So if Lauri gets 2 fouls in the first minute, it's Ochai coming in.
Right. If Colin and Jordan start together, who defends the best guard defender? Or
Colin. Neither. They'll score, though.
They will. All right. Walker and Lauri are the guys we should be talking about. Let's start with Lauri. What is the developmental next step for Lauri Markkanen that moves him? And this is a monumental movement from a top 20 player and maybe 20th. I think he was right around there. Like he was about 17, 18, 19, 20, right? It's just off all NBA. To a second team all NBA player, which is top 10 in the NBA. Like that's like right off the Jimmy Butler, right? Like there's 9 guys in this league that are like in that pending injury, have those first 2 teams. And I'm asking him to sneak right in there. Like, what is that step? Because if he does that, then they're really good. Like, because if you have one of the 10 best players in the league, you win a lot of games.
You pick the one. I'm gonna take 3. You take out of the 3 that I pick. You pick one.
Okay.
Number 1, fluidity off the dribble.
Oh, I like it.
The ability to beat his guy.
Okay.
Obviously he got a lot of stuff off flex cuts and baseline cuts and pin downs. And the beauty of Lauri Markkanen is he can score without you giving him the ball.
Yep.
You don't need to force him the ball for him to score because he can find the ball just the way he moves off the ball, the way he moves in transition, the way he rebounds offensively. He just does a ton of things that don't involve dribbling the basketball that lets him score. Catch and shoot, shooting on the move, just everything. If he develops fluidity off the dribble to where you can give him the ball and he can consistently beat his man, Jesus.
Right. Yep.
He's going to be really freaking good.
Yep.
So that's number 1. Number 2 for Lauri, playmaking for others. Last year, he wasn't much of a playmaker for others. If he goes from, let's say, a 3 to a 6 or a 4 to a 7, that's going to help him a lot. And third is just overall acumen defensively. If he goes from, a 5 to an 8 defensively, then all of a sudden he's a real force on both ends of the floor. So out of those 3, which is the one that you like the most?
So I'm giving him a pass defensively.
Okay.
Sorry, Will. I'm going to go with isolation because I stumbled upon a really interesting kind of.
So that goes into fluidity off the dribble to me for me.
So here's an interesting little note. I'm pulling this up. You walked me into this and I wasn't totally prepared. If you go to January 1st in the NBA and you look at Lauri's isolation numbers, I think he's about the best there is in the NBA at that point. He's at 1.275 pre-January 1st, and I think it's about as good as anyone in the NBA. And then if you switch that and take that to from January 1st to the end of the season, okay? So we go to, and I got to give me one note, so I'll put this in. And the earliest date is now January 2nd. And I think you could do February 1st to make this more clear. But I think he actually comes out as one of the least good offensive players in isolation in that time frame. He literally went from one of the best to one of the worst in the NBA. And the reason is,
you know what the context is.
Yeah, well, there's two contexts.
Mike Conley and Malik Beasley.
Yeah. And so he had to really create it himself. Right. And they asked him to do it. Like, I think in the first time he was doing it like once or twice every 100 possessions. And now suddenly he was doing it 3 or 4 times, right? They turned it over to him and they said, go try to do this. And he wasn't quite ready for it. He averaged 0.92 points in isolation from January 1st on. And prior to January 1st, he was 1.28 points. Like that's monumentally different. And so, and what it was is that from up to January 1, every time Lauri had when isolation was only in matchups, he knew he could beat someone and he just beat him and he was great at it. And then after January 1 was like, I don't care the matchup, go beat guys. So yes, that's where I am. Like, that's his jump is, can he just, you know what? This is my freaking possession. I don't give a crap who's guarding me. I'm that strong, that skilled, that versatile. You get up on tight, I'm taking you 3 dribbles all the way to the rack. You drop off me, I'm going 1 dribble into a pull-up, whatever it might be, and have that skill regardless of who's guarding him and regardless of how many times the team wants it out of him.
The difference this year from last year is he's going to have Jordan Clarkson and John Collins on the floor with him.
And how do you see that impacting things?
Well, it's different because now you have to actually commit guys to guys, right? So if I'm committing my best guy to Lauri Markkanen, then my second best guy is on John Collins, and maybe my third best guy is on Jordan Clarkson. And the downhill and you know, the ripple effect of that is Jordan Clarkson is going to beat most of your third guys. And John Collins can beat a lot of the second guys. You know, so now you have 3 dynamic guys in the starting lineup. If you put Colin Sexton in the starting lineup, now you have 4 dynamic guys in the starting lineup.
And you have 4 guys who, if we're really honest, none of them pass.
None of them pass, but they can all score and they can all beat guys.
Be super interesting if they can start passing.
So, you know, the question is, let's just say Colin Sexton is the starting point guard. The question is, how much is this group going to play for one another? Not that they don't want to play for one another, because their hearts are going to be in the right place, because those are 5 good guys. But in terms of their games, how much are they going to play for? They're going to play for one another. How much are they going to move the ball? You know, if Colin Sexton doesn't have, if he doesn't get a touch in 5 possessions, on that 6th possession when he gets a touch, is it going up or is he going to make the right basketball play? Same thing with Jordan Clarkson. Now, I think Lauri Markkanen, it just kind of doesn't matter because he's the best player. He's going to have touches no matter what. You know, how much does Walker Kessler run if he doesn't touch the ball on 8 possessions? Me as a New York Knicks fan, if Mitchell Robinson doesn't touch the ball on 5 possessions, watch how he stops running the floor. Watch how he stops rebounding. Watch how he stops protecting the rim, doing the things that makes him good. So if Walker Kessler doesn't touch the ball in 8 or 9 possessions, does he still do the things that makes him Walker Kessler? I mean, so there's just a lot of stuff. So there's going to be more integration for this roster than I think people realize. Like the first 20 games, there are going to be a lot of lineups. There's going to be a lot of experimentation. There's going to be a lot of things that Will Hardy's going to have to do to see what works and what doesn't. And then I think that you know, they're going to settle in or somewhere around game 25 to what works and what doesn't.
I mean, Will's signature is how much he was willing to fiddle with the lineups and do those kind of things. We'll talk about that. That's actually one of my discussions for tomorrow or Friday's show with Tony Jones is how will Hardy be different? How will it's a tricky sentence. How will Hardy be different in year number 2 as a head coach? We'll talk about that coming up later this week. All right. More with Tony Jones. What is the Jazz starting 5? This is my little trick question. On March 1st. What is the Jazz starting 5 on March 1st? Next, with the great Tony Jones. Today's show is brought to you in part by our friends over at FanDuel. Football season is right around the corner, and FanDuel's got a bunch of great opportunities for you coming up here. Here's the deal. Football season's kicking off, and FanDuel is giving you a chance to win all season long because right now, when you bet a Super Bowl winner like Tony Jones's Commanders, are we going there, Tony?
I'm not going there.
All right, bye, Tony. Because right now, when you bet a Super Bowl winner, you get the bonus bet every time they win a regular season game. You get another bonus bet. So just pick any team to win the Super Bowl, not the Commanders, And you'll get a bonus bet for every victory. You can use your bonus bets on spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and start streaming with bonus bets with America's #1 sports bet book. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon, the official sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network. Go get your bonus bets today. Also, all sorts of great NBA early season props are up at FanDuel as well. Back with the great Tony Jones. Thank you very much for listening to Locked On. Tony will be back with us later this week. Sarah Todd next week. Excited. Never had Sarah on the pod before. Hope to have Thurl Bailey. Sneaking a little Ben Anderson. How about a little Dan Clayton? I'm going to give the blogger some love. He does great work. Frankly, I use him for a lot of prep. Might as well give him a little love on the show. Those are some of the guests. We hope we'll run this for the next 6-7 weeks up to the season, and the rest. Schedule's out. We can all taste it. It's all ready. We're all great. Like, yay. All right. So, TJ, or part of the schedule's out. We're not playing on Christmas. We know that. What is the Jazz starting five? This is like a super complicated question. And not only are you on Muscle Watch, we're going to watch you dance here because the underlying part of this question is the one none of us want to answer. What is the Jazz starting five on March 1st?
I'm going to go with the obvious. Jordan Clarkson, Walker Kessler, Lauri Markkanen.
Okay, who else?
Can I just stop there?
No.
Okay.
You do not think Jordan Clarkson gets traded at the trade deadline, you're saying?
I actually think there's a chance he does get traded by the trade deadline, but I'm not going off of that. I'm just going off of he's on the roster now.
Okay, all right. This is great podcasting right there. That pure silence that Tony just gave us was super great. Had me fiddling around wondering what audio problem I was having now on the show. That cost me a year of my life right there. Just want to let everyone know.
I'm going to go Colin Sexton, and I'm going to go John Collins.
So you're not changing your starting lineup from opening night to...
No, and this is why. I think the Jazz are going to be good enough that on March 1st, those games are going to matter.
Okay. So here's what I think super interesting. This is what I think super interesting.
It could be Keontae George, but that's only if the games on March 1st don't matter. Right. And I think that the games on March 1st are going to matter.
So I don't know how we get to this, but people, because of the John Collins acquisition changes some things. People asked me early on, what do you think we're going to win next year? And I said, well, I can't tell if it's 26, 36, or 46. I said, I have just no idea if it's 26, 36, or 46. And I could make a really strong argument that 26 is the right answer. Because 26, my starting lineup on March 1st is Keontae George, Ochai Agbaji, Lauri Markkanen, Taylor Hendricks, and Walker Kessler. And you are not winning games with 4 players in a first or second year playing in NBA games. Like, it's too hard.
So here's what I think. The Utah's athleticism, I mean, I don't think people realize it. They might be one of the 5 most athletic teams in the league.
That's really interesting. I had not thought about this. This is,
I mean,
you've said this now twice in our conversation.
Their length and their athleticism, especially up front, they're going to overwhelm teams on some nights because, you put Lowry.
You realize what I'm doing at the end of this show? You realize I'm going through every roster.
Just go through every roster, look at their front court, look at the collective athleticism at every roster on the front court, and then look at Lauri Markkanen, Walker Kessler, and John Collins. And you see how they stack up. They're going to overwhelm teams with their length and athleticism on a lot of nights. Now, the lack of the passing, possibly the lack of a point guard, could derail the season. And I've said this on Twitter, but if the Jazz, if this roster had who the Jazz hope Keontae George is 3 years from now, if Keontae George progresses in 3 years as they hope, and they had Keontae George, and you put him on this roster could win 50 games. Because that's what it's missing. It's missing is missing a really, really good point guard. But they have enough, like Walker Kessler is good enough defensively. Lauri Markkanen, to me, if what he is last year is what he is this year, that's an all-NBA talent. John Collins is an 18 and 10 guy. Jordan Clarkson is a 20 point per game guy. You put all of that together, they're going to run teams out of the building on some nights.
All right, we're going to hold this. We're going to hold this conversation to Friday. I have something I want to get to today, and we have one more. You're with me one more day this week because I have actually had this is great because I've actually had the totally opposite reaction when I've run through lineups in the NBA. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. But I wanted to get to one thing today, and that was give me the path for Keontae George. I love Bryce Sensabaugh too, by the way. He was like probably of the college film I watched of the three. Bryce Sensabaugh's was my favorite film. I get it. Taylor Hendrick ran the
third best shooter in the draft.
Right. Taylor Hendrick ran the floor once, and I was like, oh, well, you can take him at 9. Like, you run like that at 6'10" and 225 pounds, and okay, yes. And Keontae George is, honestly, I did not like his college film particularly the game that worried me the most was he played Arkansas and got 3 of his first 4 shots blocked. He was also heavier. He was stuck on the floor than the player we saw at Summer League was a totally different player. So I got it. And Bryce Sensabaugh, I loved. Like, can he figure out how to get his usage down? And we haven't talked about him once. But let's go rookie development. Like, give me Taylor Hendrick's rookie developmental path and then do the same with Keontae George. But start with Taylor Hendricks. Like, how's he getting minutes? Where's he getting minutes? Does he G League for a little while? Like, what is the progression for this youngster and what are the things that are most important in his developmental path this year?
Well, I think he's the 5th big. Typically, you play 5 bigs a night. So
that's 8 minutes a night.
It's 8 minutes a night.
Yeah.
But he's playing 8 minutes a night. That means he's getting off the bench for 8 minutes a night. So if that's indeed his role, then maybe you play him in the G League a couple of times, but those 8 minutes a night are going to be more valuable than, because when Ochai Agbaji started getting 8 minutes a night, guess what? It was really valuable.
Can I give you one reason why I actually think Taylor Hendrick's G League minutes would be super interesting and important?
Yeah.
He's never been the best player on his team.
He was the best player on his team last year.
So that was the first time. And he wasn't their number one. He didn't take the most shots. He's never been the guy. Like, if you go back to his AAU teams, right? He's on a loaded ASU team. He's on a high school team.
His high school team.
So let me rephrase. I phrased it wrong. He's never been the go-to guy.
Right. Never been
on his team. And I would love to see him go play 25, 30 minutes a night in the G League where they actually said, all right, go. Like, make plays. Play with the ball in your hand. Learn how to do these things.
Agreed.
Like, I'd like to see that.
Agreed. There's value in that. But I'd also like to see him in, like, his NBA role is he's going to catch and shoot, and he's going to be a defensive Swiss Army knife. And, I'd like to see him in that as well. I do think towards the end of last season at UCF, you saw him do more things off the dribble than he did at the beginning of the season. At the beginning of the season, he was strictly catch and shoot, strictly running the floor, like easy putbacks, but he started getting post-ups. He started, doing things off the dribble. He started attacking closeouts, a lot of the things that you see lottery picks come to do. And he's a phenomenal defender. That's his value, right? Like, he's a phenomenal defender, and he has the makings of being a 37 to 40% 3-point shooter on the other end. So to me, if he develops, you want him to be similar to what Jaren Jackson is now. So
yeah, it wouldn't suck.
No, it wouldn't suck at all. Now he has a long way to go. Jaren Jackson right now is pretty freaking good.
Yeah.
Now the other thing that
Memphis is having the same conversation about Jaren Jackson that we're having about Lauri Markkanen of how can you move him into the top 15 players in the NBA?
Yeah, he might be there right now. Now the thing with Taylor is he needs a lot of time in the weight room. He's 212 pounds. He needs to be about 225 or 230. So This year might be developmental for that, so he can work on his body. But, when you get beyond the first three bigs and you get beyond Kelly Olynyk, there's going to be Taylor Hendricks. And those first four guys, they ain't playing 82 games. So there are going to be plenty of nights where Taylor Hendricks gets to play. For that matter, there are going to be nights where Bryce Sensabaugh gets to play. And, I think out of all of the rookies, I think Keontae George is by far the most likely to start the season in the rotation. So I know he's going to play.
Okay, put Keontae George in the rotation. You're playing, how many guards you playing?
I don't know, but I think the Jazz want him to be in the rotation.
I agree. I think he's probably earned that from his summer league play to figure it out. Now, being a guard in the NBA in your first year is brutally hard.
I think if Keontae George is not in the rotation, that means he had a really bad training camp.
Okay. I would agree. But it's hard. It's still like you had Chris Dunn starting or Colin Sexton starting with Jordan Clarkson. So then you have Ochai and Colin, then he's the fifth. Right? Then he's your 10. And frankly, Will played 9 more often than he played 10 last year. Playing 10 is really hard.
Playing 10 is hard.
So it's interesting. Like if you put Keontae George in the rotation, you have Chris Dunn and Taylor Horton Tucker out of the rotation.
And this is where I think Will is going to have a challenge this year because I think he has 11 rotational guys.
And this is part of what I love about this team. But also when I look around the NBA, I get nervous. And that's where we're going to start on Friday with the great Tony Jones. It's coming up. Thanks so much for being part of Locked On Jazz. Thank you for the everydayers. Thank you for making us our first listen. Read Tony at The Athletic. Send him thank you tweets and notes. He appreciates that. We appreciate him coming on the show, and he's back with us for our interview week. Final edition on Friday with Locked On Jazz.